This lesson is a quick look at the command line options that are available on the Java compiler. Whenever you specify the name of a class on an import statement, the compiler will look for it in the standard places with a standard installation. It will find it. However, if you're using some special class file or for any reason have some class files stored in a non-standard location, you have to tell the compiler where to look for them. You can do this by naming the directories on the command line with this option, or by setting the class path environment variable. The class path is a list of directory names separated by semicolons on Windows and separated by colons on other systems. The compiler produces class files. The default is to put them in the current directory, but this option instructs the compiler to put them in this other directory. If you compile a program and get a message from the compiler saying that you're using something that has been deprecated, you can compile it again with this option to get more information about what has been deprecated. Something, usually a method, becomes deprecated when a newer method or whatever is the preferred form. Quite often there is a better way of doing something, or sometimes they just change the name of a method to try to get a more standardized pattern to the naming. Using something that has been deprecated is not an error. Your program will run just fine with it, but what you might want to do is run the compiler with this option, find out what you are using that has been deprecated, look it up in the documentation. Right there, you'll find a link to the preferred way of doing things. This has to do with the encoding of the text in the source file. If for some reason you wind up with source code from some strange place and need to translate the characters into something you can compile, then you need to research this. Otherwise, forget about it. If you're going to be running a debugger on the program, you can use this option to have the compiler include lots more debugging information than just the source file and the line number. This can be used to prevent the compiler from including even the source file and line number information. The compiler will include certain kinds of debugging information based on the keywords you include in a comma-separated list. Now, there are only 3 of these keywords. This includes source file debugging information, line number debugging information, local variable debugging information. This option will print this list of options. This disables all warning messages. I'm sure there is a reason for this option, I just can't think of one right now. This enables support for compiling source code containing assertions. Setting release to 1.4 allows assertions in the code. Setting it to 1.3 disallows them. This specifies the directories in which the compiler will look for source files. It's a list of directory names separated by semicolons. A location can also be a jar or a zip file. This option causes the compiler to output lots of information about what it's doing while it's doing it. Each class file is compiled to be run with the current version of the virtual machine. Future virtual machines are expected to run it, but those from the past won't. You can specify that the compiler should produce a class file of the previous version by specifying this option. There are 4 versions that can be specified, and you write them just simple number.number. That's the major number and minor number. This option specifies directories containing a different set of standard classes than the ones installed with your compiler. It can be in directories, jar files, or zip files. This option specifies directories containing a different set of extension classes than the ones installed into your compiler. There are a few options that are not considered standard in Java, but they're included as sort of a test or a special case. Exactly what these options are will vary from one version of Java to the next. This displays the list of non-standard options. You ought to give this a try with your current compiler because you're almost certain to find some options that are not listed here. This redirects the message generated by the compiler into the named file. This can be handy when you get so many errors that they scroll off the screen and you can't see the first ones. This causes a warning message to be issued for every case statement that doesn't have a break before the next case statement. There are circumstances where the compiler needs to run the Java virtual machine, and with this option, you can specify an option to be passed to the Java virtual machine.